but we have expectations of how the world needs to function. And if it doesn't function the way we think it needs to, then we begin to compensate it with thinking to justify and or solve the problem.
You have wondered what you would be able to do if you were the ultimate version of you, right? You would then have an easy time creating what you want, and yes, effortlessly enjoying life too. Now, you may know this already, the influence you have over your reality is far beyond what you've been told. Soon, you realize that your outer world is merely a mirror of your inner world, and we're here to connect the dots for you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to God Mode.
All right. And welcome back to God Mode.
She's out.
Yeah. We tried getting the cat to stay on the episode. This is why you should watch video. Honestly, we have it on Spotify and YouTube. You miss little things like this if you're only listening. They had a cat on the table. Don't you guys want to see that? Of course you do. So watch on Spotify or YouTube.
And subscribe and like.
Like, share, all the stuff.
Guys, we had 2 weeks of David Morehouse content being shared with everybody. The response has been amazing. People are blown away with the conversation that you and him had, the insights on how the mind brings things into reality, what you can do about it, how much of it is real, how much of it is abstract, and just an invention of your own. And that led us to what we wanted to talk about today, which is the symptom of overthinking. It's something that people constantly deal with, and it's probably hyper accelerated because everybody's got phones now. There's a lot to overthink about. So it's a pretty interesting topic, and we want to give people tips, advice, how to control overthinking today.
Yeah, I think we should also talk about like why it's even a problem, right? Because it'd be like, well, overthinking, I'm trying to save myself, right? I'm trying to guess the future, but people get caught up in the fight or flight feeling of overthinking, and then they don't take action. So I think that's really what it's about. Like overthinking, how is that a problem? Well, I'm not taking action. Well, you're not taking action towards what? Well, the thing that I really want in life. Oh, how's that a problem? So we got to go down that rabbit hole a little bit.
Yeah, the numbers are crazy, right? And we have this right in front of us. 73% of 25 to 35-year-olds overthink, and 52% of 45 to 55-year-olds, and 20% of 65 to 75-year-olds. Sounds like the younger generation overthink a lot. It's a study by University of Michigan. But then coupled with that, anxiety is the most common mental illness in the US, about 19.1% of the population. Now, it's interesting because overthinking and anxiety are connected, aren't they? Because what are we overthinking? If we were to get specific, what are we really overthinking about? And if we are overthinking great things, happy things, people wouldn't have anxiety.
That's a good thing to overthink about. That's interesting.
So if I may, I think that a good way from Upgrade's perspective, what overthinking is I'm going to give a few different metaphors to explain this. The first one is like a computer or a smartphone. Have you ever gotten on your phone and you're like, oh man, I have too many photos and I'm out of storage?
Yes. Then Apple makes you buy the 2 terabyte, which I did. I actually have 4.
Hey, and now if you didn't, you run out of storage and then you can't store any more stuff.
And you get the notification constantly.
And then you need to run certain things. Like, I mean, in a computer, if you ran out of storage, it slows down. It's overloaded. If you have a spreadsheet and you get in there and there's 10,000 phone numbers, all of a sudden you're like, I don't know where to start.
Sounds like your lead pool.
So, and you're like, well, who do I talk to? Who do I not talk to, right? So when you look at the overwhelming amount of data that is bombarding us daily, on top of all these things that we just talked about, from social media to traditional media to events that we think are happening around us, to personal events, to things happening at our work or outside of work, romantic relationships, all of those things together, all of a sudden, we have this overload of data. And so how do you not overthink? That's actually not the normal state. Overthinking becomes the normal state. And then people get overthinking on things that they don't want. because that grabs attention in an economy that is driven by motivations like fear, anger, sadness, anything shocking and or threatening. People are going to overthink negative things, therefore naturally experience anxiety.
Yeah. And there's a lot of different reasons that we overthink, right? One of the questions that is on here, is this something I'm born with or is it learned behavior? Because some people, how do I put this nicely? They want to think that they're the only one with a problem, right? And
that's a nice way to put it.
Yeah. Sometimes when a student says that to us, I actually be like, oh, I'll get the award from so-and-so and I'll get it to you now. Trying to be nice, but it's to break the
That's
state.
cold.
It's to break the state of the humor, right? Like, you're not the only person. There's 8 billion people on this planet, all right? So let's not make it special that you're the only person that overthinks.
Understand. I'm special.
Exactly. But it is, it ties back from what we have found working with a lot of students now, a lot of testing now. Most of this comes back to your values and your beliefs, right? Because you would want, if you ask someone, like, you would want an abundance of opportunities, right? You would want to have a lot of good choices and a lot of things going on good around. And that was what you were talking about earlier, if you could focus on the good things, right? But if all these good things are around you and you have some beliefs underneath that you maybe don't deserve X, Y, and Z because you came from a family, neighborhood, whatever, that never had those things, then you're going to begin to filter out all those awesome things for you available and only focus on the bad things, right? And then you may overthink and get stressed about, well, I still want that, but how do I take the action steps to go with it? So I'll just keep focusing on the bad things. So I think it's less about like overthinking, but really comes back to skill set and training of the mind's ability to focus.
Mm-hmm. Dude, well, like when you get a new car, you start seeing that car everywhere. Like Emily, we were picking out, a Mercedes, and so now we're seeing this car everywhere. It's like the brain's got this ability to just, you have added some like time and you've pondered X thing, so you're going to see it everywhere. What's cool is that thing, insert X thing, can be controlled. And it's not obvious to some people, I guess, that you can do that. But like the statistic is like only 43% of people actually get treatment for their anxiety or their depression. So it's like not even 1 in 2. So I had an engagement. I was engaged once and it exploded. Total train wreck, bad situation. And so I went to a therapist and I got on an SSRI. And for me, it was like I would just deal with these waves of anxiety. And it was like the thing I was focusing on. And so then I took some steps, but that made the difference ultimately. But there's one in like every other person that is also dealing with these crippling feelings. They're not doing anything about it. And so that's kind of an interesting assessment of how many people are dealing with this and how many are actually proactively trying to take steps to take care of it. Because there are, it's not a bad thing to seek out a therapist. And, if someone gets on an SSRI, get off of it when you can. But there are steps that you can do. But before any of that, it helps to just say, well, what are you typically focusing on? Because that's probably determinant of like what you're going through.
Yeah, and I think we need to give them better tools too, better training, better resources, because in my opinion, traditional therapy doesn't do enough. They do a lot of, and this is just my opinion, of course, continuation of focusing on the problem, the continuation of just talking and still focusing on the thing that's worrying them. And that propels the user, our mind, to continue to focus on that. And why that's an issue is because I'll actually give something I heard recently. They studied Vietnam veterans, right? And they wanted to know how many of all the veterans had PTSD. And they found that 30% of them had PTSD. But then they actually...
That's it?
That's what they said, yeah. Wow. 30% of them had what they classified clinical PTSD.
Well, some probably aren't reporting, just like some aren't reporting their anxiety, right?
Well, that's actually the interesting part. After they did that analysis, they found that out of that 30%, only 12 to 14% have actually had seen in-person battle. So what does that mean? That means that a lot of them probably were experiencing PTSD from just being around other Vietnam veterans who had experienced battle, and now they're taking on that I have traumatic as well. Empathy, right? Wow. I'm experiencing this too. So let's correlate that to anxiety that we see in children, right? XY person might have actually had a traumatic experience at home with a parent or whoever, right? And then maybe someone else is around them, they just hear about it, and now they're traumatic and they believe the anxiety. They go home and tell their parent and see how it begins to spread. So I'm not saying that these numbers aren't real. What I'm saying is we need to dive down into a little bit more and get a little more granular. And then ask what kind of tools and resources are available for these people out there. Because if someone in traditional talk therapy is being like, yeah, you do have anxiety. Yeah, we do need to give you an SRI or SSRI.
Let me reaffirm that for you.
Yeah, they keep like, we're getting away from the human spirit that is truly resilient and always trying to give aid in some way that is not the most effective tool, in my opinion.
One time I had a conversation, and this is connected to this. One time I had a conversation with a gentleman, and he's like, hey, I'm addicted. I'm like, to what? And then I'm not going to share what he's addicted to, but he's like, it's a big problem. I can't stop it. And I'm like, that's great news. He's like, that's weird. Nobody's ever told me that. I'm like, well, if you look at the content of what you're telling me, yeah, sure, maybe it's a problem. But if you tell me the context of being addicted, I don't have to make value judgment of whether that's good or bad, that you have a obsessive personality or addictive personality. What if you're addicted to happiness and success and creating joy for other people and doing great things for society? We can just channel that focus there. You would be one of the most contributing members of society. He's like, whoa, I could do that. I've been focusing on what I don't want, right? And so Michael, when he's saying what he's saying, I completely agree, because at school, how many of us were taught how to deal with our emotions?
Not at all.
None of us.
Never. I don't think they know how to. The teachers, they'd have never been taught, right? Even therapists oftentimes don't.
And I mean, to defend the teachers in some way, because my mother's a teacher, so I feel like if she ever listens to the podcast, she's going to ask me to defend herself.
She's like, why are you dying?
They're doing the best they can with the resources they have available to them, and they are caring people about the students. But I would still say you should not be giving clinical psychological advice to children if there is some kind of thing.
They're going to.
And
We can't stop them, right?
They're already doing it.
Parents
the whole
do it.
woke mind virus. But that's another tangent.
I think that parents should have that kind of thing, because there's value systems in the family, like, hey, let me talk to the kids, right? But students, actually, the teachers who are trying to counsel the students on psychology and be like, yeah, your behavior is X, Y, and Z. You do have ADHD or whatever, like not you, but like,
yeah, you are a girl inside.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, there should be a line. We got to give them better tools.
Yeah, definitely. And in fact, I think it's quite tragic how many people don't have the tools, considering how advanced our technologies and science is nowadays, right? It's the distribution of tools that are aggregated to actually produce results that's missing. One thing about that too is that I observed something interesting. I was talking to someone extremely successful, created significant amount of success in their own life and have huge influence. And one time I was in a private conversation with this individual. This individual thinks he's giving me advice. He's like, hey, sometimes bad things just happen to good people like you. I'm like, but not me though. He's like, no, it's okay if it does. I'm like, you don't understand the effects of language and suggestions.
Yeah.
And you think that you've got the world figured out, but you don't, right? And the individual's shocked that I would say something like that. I'm like, look, with love, what you just said is a mental virus, that if the population receives it and accepts it, without me stopping you from spreading it, lots of people will experience bad things happening to them. Because guess what? The logic in which you have just spoken is good things, or good people have bad things happen to them, right? Or bad things happen to good people. If someone identifies as a good person, they will inherently, if they believe you, take on the bad things happening to them. That's basic logic. I'm like, stop preaching it, right?
I mean, this has got to be rewinded like 2 or 3 times, because I really want someone to really think about what William just said. If you believe you're a good person, but you also at the same time believe what someone might say, something like that, hey, sometimes bad things just happen to good people.
And that's you.
Then you're going to find a way with your confirmation bias that we all have at some level to find out how bad things can happen to me and just say, it's okay. I'm a good person though.
this happens to me.
right?
That is a weirdly good point.
And I don't know the person that you're talking about, but I had a similar situation with a student like that. But just about 20 minutes earlier, we had talked about how words are so powerful because he loves to say affirmations. So I stared at him for a minute and I was like, what you just said is completely contradictory. It's like sometimes shit just happens, right? That's what he said to good people. Like he was talking about his problem. I was like, hey, well, 20 minutes earlier, you just said that you truly believe in the power of words and how you tell yourself good affirmations all the time. He's like, yeah. I was like, tell me again what you just said. It was like a mirror right in front of him. So sometimes we get caught in those dichotomies where we're not realizing. And this is again where Upgrade comes in, guys. This is how we help. We are the scanning device for those flaws, for those source codes that you're holding on to that are, you know, casting spells in your own life.
Destroying their lives, frankly, right? And look, it's not one person. In fact, I probably had countless people tell me those exact words from the beginning of my career to now and or before. And they're good people too, but they have a mental virus they don't even know they have. Somebody poisoned them.
And that can definitely lead to overthinking.
Yeah.
Right.
If all of a sudden you think you're a good person and like, say you take on this, I'm a good person, but sometimes bad things happen to me. Then you might be overthinking about like, well, is this happening to me? Is this the bad thing? And then how do I get out of it? Like,
And what kind of bad things are going to happen? What else is going to happen?
And then you start to maybe distrust the person that's doing it to you, right? When really the good person is someone who cares about you most of the time, right? And maybe they just don't have the good communication tools too. There's so many different factors. But overthinking usually is a stem back to what you talked about, I think it was a couple weeks ago, the binary. You probably talked about it with David as well. That binary thinking, we have got to evolve out of that.
Well said. Well, and someone that has evolved out of that is like a much more calming presence. You know, like they have control over their nervous system. I meet people that haven't yet figured that out, and they feel energetically like a wreck. You're like, oh my gosh, this person's like in this like chaotic storm in their head like all the time. And you hope that they can get out of it, because I've been there before. And the last thing you want to be when you're there is there. So you resolve things, find peace. Life is so much better at peace. And so the notion of, is this like inherent to people, or is it like a learned behavior? I mean, it seems like it can be magnified, like you can choose to make it worse, but that is a choice. And so the alternate is choose to focus on things that will make you happier. And that seems
if I had to answer the question, I would say learned behavior. I would not say it's born with it.
Yeah.
Like I believe overthinking is a behavior that you learn from observation and then playing out as well. Like if I observed my parents growing up overthinking, hey, I got a model now to download and install in my own mind.
People say it all the time, like, well, we're just not those people. Like, we don't go on vacation, or we're not those people that are meant for big homes and fancy cars. We've never been those people. Virus, your antivirus alert, got to go off, you know, reject that.
Yeah.
And I've had to, since I've gone through Upgrade and worked with you guys, I constantly have in my inner narrative, when I hear a suggestion I don't want, deliberately, very clearly, I have my narrative inside my head, or I'll say it out loud. I'm like, I reject that suggestion. And
that's good.
Compounding over time, I've seen it make a difference. And it seems like, I don't know, trivial, like, oh, okay, what, are you waving a magic wand? Kind of. Yeah, I am. I want to protect my inner world. And so anxiety being, frankly, rampant, anyone could come down with that. Anyone could deal with it or suffer with it, but I'm choosing not to. And that, again, I'm not trying to be glib about that. I'm trying to say that that's the first step, is choosing, like, I'm now choosing to try and steer away from this. There's a bunch of ways to do it. First step is to choose that you're ready to let it go, right?
That's a great point, because the population right now, if we look at the micro, we're talking about every one of these individuals may be overthinking, right? But if you talk about the macro, if a population's overthinking, you can look at the media, you can look at some of the distractions and or what's happening or what's not happening as a reflection of the population's overthinking.
Right.
It's an interesting scenario where, man.
And if you really want to get conspiracy theorists, you'd be like, oh, a population of people who just overthink probably won't do too much.
Yeah, and then we'll open up the border and they'll just look at that and you'll get more anxiety. It'll be great.
That's a very interesting scenario, the whole border thing, because as I was
Interesting.
traveling,
I don't know if it's a word I would use.
The Darien Gap. Sean Ryan show just interviewed
Interesting's
somebody.
a nice word.
He's been down there for over a year assessing the situation. It is beyond anything that anyone presently understands. It's crazy, but go on.
yeah, I'm being nice about the word interesting. I would say that this is probably one of the worst situations when it comes to just letting anyone come through. And I haven't even been there, right? Just based on what I've seen, what I've researched. And I was traveling in Europe the last bit, and I observed that there's migration that people are not liking as well in Europe throughout many of the countries.
Turkey as well.
Amsterdam,
Oh man.
all the Netherlands again, just invaded.
I was talking to my friend in Portugal. They're like, some of the colonies have this belief that because we colonized them, they need to now come and take from us. Things like that are not uncommon across the globe when it comes to beliefs of what is justified, what is not, why someone needs to cross a border. I mean, I don't know all of the reasons, but I do think that there's from my observation, there's going to be a clash of values.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Meaning people are going to have different way of living, thinking, and experiencing life, and they're going to clash. If anything's going to crash, I think it's going to clash the most with the people that are the most identified with being woke. So here's why, right? Although it seems like if we look at America, the Republican Party would probably be most against about opening the border, if I'm being,
Generally, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And so, but then what's interesting is the more the border opens, the more clashing of values there will be against the people who are not the Republicans. In fact, if you invite people from all over the Middle East to Asia to South America coming in, they are not going to identify with the wokeism or whatever you call it. And there's going to be a huge war of values against the very people that proposed the opening of borders.
That is crazy to think about, because they are like, hey, I'm all for it. And you should be all for helping other people's lives get better. And that's probably the
There needs to be
underpinning.
a system.
Yeah,
I mean,
but that's not what's happening.
That's what governing law is for, though, to stop violent clash of values. Because here in America, I think why we were so great as a country is we allowed different values to come in through law.
Legal.
Yeah, through a law system of checks and balances. So they integrated and they knew like, hey, I'm in a land of opportunity now. I'm going to
They pledge their
blend
allegiance.
in. I'm going to do the best I can. And you could still see in like New York City, for example, different suburbs. Like here's the Italian, here's the Russia, here's the, and everyone still got along.
They figured it out.
Yeah. And maybe you still hung out with people who were from your homeland, but you still lived in a country where everyone was like, we support American values. Now, as you're saying, with these different values coming in, if there's no law to govern them as they come in, if there's no right way of passage legally, then they're going to clash. And there could be a violent retaliation, unfortunately.
Well, those people too are like, talking about anxiety. You ever get not invited to a party and you're just on the outside of that party looking in, and it's like, okay, Michael, you always got invited to the parties. I get it.
I was trying to think of one.
The idea that the whole world basically watches the United States, and envy is a really powerful emotion. It's really powerful. It's not every person that's coming across the border, but I see a lot of videos where they will film themselves talking about exploits that they've found. Hey, now that you've gotten over the border, these states have laws that allow you to squat in these houses. And they're like, yeah, and we're sticking it to them. We're going to get in there, and these squatter laws are going to protect us. I think it was Massachusetts. This lady literally lost her house because she like went out of town and someone broke into it, claimed to be a squatter. And now the law had the police arrest the homeowner. Like she couldn't take her house back. So there's a lot of people that are coming through. They're like, I've been envious of this country and their prosperity, and they've gotten fat on the hog, and now I'm coming in and justice is mine, which is this bizarre Like, we weren't aware of you. We're not doing these things to enrage you in any way, but people are coming, and they are coming with a lot of anger and a lot of envy, and they want some sort of invented justice in their head for, it's very one-sided. And people, like you said, people that embrace woke ideologies are thinking this is a great idea.
They're the houses that got broken into.
Yeah, they're like, wait a minute, this totally backfired. Like, yeah, we know.
And what's interesting about that is because coming from the real estate world background, squatting is not a new thing, right? And especially in cities like, or states like Massachusetts, states like Illinois, Chicago's been one of the biggest cities that have squatters have ever
Dude, that's
existed.
crazy to me.
I had a friend who had a 12 unit there, and he couldn't get them out. And this was in 2018. He had squatters. Okay, so that's 6 years ago now. I can do math. Yeah, 6 years ago, 2018.
How is it possible?
The point of it is now that's more advertised for some reason. Like, it's always been that in some woke cities that you know, they just weren't going to kick you out. The cops couldn't do anything, or no legal ramifications. Like, my buddy at one point was like, I want to burn it down trying to get the fire insurance, you know, just to get it.
That's a good move. It's a crime, but hey.
but the point is, now there's like somehow that is getting out, like, hey, you know, illegal migrants to come in and you can get squatting, no one's coming out. It's like, why is that information getting out in some ways?
Yeah.
So that's where, all right, who's getting that information out there?
Those people are coming in with anxiety. If those clash of values, like if they could look inward and be like, why am I so like mad, or like I'm looking for revenge? It's like, well, like you're living in an anxious state where you're like, oh, well, I don't have, you know, and it's weird. Like, I went to Haiti and I met some of the happiest people that had like less than nothing, you know, and some of the happiest people are content with life and they have very little. And it's almost like some people, it's like the accruement of more leads to an increase in anxiety, which should not be directly correlated, but sometimes it is. Like, people get anxious if they start to have a little bit of abundance or prosperity, shift into value level 3. Well, now I got to take it from everybody else so I can keep it, you know? And it's weird. It's like, if I could work with everybody one-on-one, or I knew that social programs were in place with this massive influx to say, hey, we do things differently here. You should be able to get along with people. It would help to learn English. It would help to not squat in freaking houses, but none of that's happening. And so it's really, we're in for a very interesting few months and years.
It's not so much of a me against them or us against them type of thing, right? Because if we look at the planet, is this sort of migration, what is it doing to the planet? And how is it going to pan out in the long term? Because certainly in the short term, there's going to be potentially a lot of worries and anxiety and security risks of all sorts. I do think on the flip side, long term, it's not really going to be an issue. That's just an opinion. Because migration happens throughout history. People move legally, illegally. That being said, I'm not proposing illegal immigration at all, right? I legally immigrated, and it's a lot of work. And I went by the rules and I moved here, and it took a lot of effort. So for someone to just get a handout and move in, to me, I mean, I'm not going to say it's fair or not fair, but I'm going to be like, wow, really? Right? That being said, I look at it and I'm like, what kind of benefits could we get out of this? And I'm not saying us necessarily, but in general, how can we create a win-win? Because if they're already here, either they're going to get deported, right? If they are not going to, then how can we make it? How can we make it a win-win-win-win-win? That's a very strange question, because for especially someone like myself, if I wasn't here in Upgrade and doing all these trainings, my mind might go to, wow, this is absurd that these people are here. I mean, it's like if I worked super hard to land a job and some kid just randomly got it because he crossed the border, right? And so, in my opinion, the biggest question we ought to ask is, if we can't immediately create a specific solution that can satisfy the nation, what can we do to create win-win-win-win-win? And I think a lot of it comes down to this episode's topic. Overthinking is the result of people not knowing how to manage their thoughts and emotions. And then the anxiety is simply a sign that they're focusing on the worst or just a number of different negative scenarios in the future. So, if we look at instead of like illegal immigrants or migrants or whatever we call it, the term, and these people are people, right?
Yes.
So
There's
if
a human
we
side to this.
and if we look at them as humans, just like us, the borders that separate us is a human constructed thing
Hmm.
that we have constructed to protect sovereignty, wealth, opportunities, a number of things. But if we look at the grand scheme of things, AI is coming and robotics is only going to get more sophisticated. Jobs are going to get eliminated, migrants are not. And AI is going to take those jobs. So regardless, if we have people coming over or not coming over, our wealth is going to increase. People are going to need to increase their skills, and overthinking isn't going to help them. In fact, AI is going to take over the people who are overthinking's jobs because their thinking is overdone, overloading their system, wasting their internal resources. AI will do a more efficient job than those people. So I think this is in a way a wake-up call to the population, including people who are moving into America legally or illegally or in any sort of way, or any other countries in the world, because migration's happening in Hong Kong where I came from, or in Europe where I just traveled to, and all over. I'm curious though, the biggest migration that's going to happen is jobs migrating to AI. What are we going to do?
Or in other sectors, them becoming entrepreneurs too, putting aside the migration, because I do think that's like a topic that we could talk about for 3 hours and really dive deep down. I do like your answer though about, or maybe not an answer, but a solution in terms of emotional intelligence. It's something we don't value enough as a society and as a species, and something that I don't feel we teach properly to the youth. We focus a lot on logical intelligence, right? What's the math, the history, the science? But I don't remember being 5 years old and someone being like, you're angry and we're going to give them some tools, like we've developed an upgrade here, or just even really deep diving into that at all. Be like, hey, it will pass. Like that's what I got told, or just like quiet down or something like that. Whatever I was told. I think a lot of our population experienced that. And that's where AI is that mirror right now that we may, as a society, may not even be able to compete at logical intelligence pretty soon.
No, not at all.
So emotional intelligence, if you're out there and you're worried like the computer's going to be smarter than me, AI is going to be smarter than you, and it's going to take your job.
It already is.
You're right.
You're right. So it's time to learn some emotional intelligence, because you don't want to be that person overthinking. You want to be the calm, cool, collected person who can still find opportunities within your environment, go start a business, go start whatever it is that you're passionate about. But that's going to come from an emotional intelligence of being resourceful and flexible.
Soft skills, human skills.
Yeah.
Emotional and mental state control and mastery is what leads to resourceful thinking. And humans who are not in that state cannot tap into resourceful thinking. So if they're overthinking, they're anxious, they can't tap into resourceful thinking. That's why they have these states. But I'll say this, the anxiety and the overthinking are merely symptomology of their incapability or lack of capability, in other words, to process their states. They don't know that emotions are a message delivery mechanism.
I love this.
Right?
Yeah. The message delivery mechanism, that reshaped my entire way of looking at anxiety or fear. If you're feeling something, there is a message attached to it. Can you dive in on that for a second?
Yeah. Right now, if someone is feeling anxious, someone is feeling like they're doing the act of overthinking and they can't think of a brighter future. Well, what is going on in their mind, right? It's actually they're being overloaded with messages, but they're not willing to open up the notifications. Like we were just talking earlier, we're like, oh, there's 600 notifications over here. and I have like 11,000 notifications on my email. I'm like, I'm not opening that.
Yeah.
Right. And so people are like, I emailed you twice. I'm like,
I don't even look at that app. I deleted it.
you,
The mail app? You deleted your email app? I'm all caught up on mine personally.
I just check things on the computer now.
like,
That's crazy.
you know, here's funny. I'm going to say this too. Like, people have this expectation. They're like, well, if you didn't check your email, it's your responsibility to check your email. If you don't check your email, then it's your problem. I'm like, where in the law obligates me that I need to check my email?
We should fact check this because it might have like if someone sends you a letter in the mail.
No,
at
I'm
your
not
house.
talking about like banks. I'm not talking about like if I am legally responsible and I signed up for paperless statements, right? Because if I enroll in that, then I'm obligated to check it.
Yeah.
But random friends, like, you haven't been checking your email. You don't like me anymore. I'm like, dude, I don't communicate by email with my friends.
Who does that?
I got it. I'm still on Instagram, but I deleted the app. But my buddy texted me. He's like, hey, I sent you like 4 reels the past couple weeks. You haven't responded. I'm like, oh, I'm just not on it. And he's like, oh, I thought you were like mad at me. I was like, no.
Overthinking.
But that's the point. Like, we go down that path. They're not responding to me, XYZ. We just make up those
How
complex
much of that
equivalents.
is happening in the dating world?
Yeah.
A guy or a girl doesn't get a message back in a day. They're like, they hate me.
I sent you a lot of reels too, by the way, and you haven't seen any of them.
Oh, well.
So I guess you hate me.
I also sent you a lot of reels. And
Let's bring it out now. Bring it out now. Dump it out.
I stayed up till 2 a.m. wondering why you didn't like me anymore. I was
Just
like,
pining.
I sent you 5 reels.
Tomorrow that meeting, I'm going to tell him what I finally feel.
I'm going to do it on air, camera capture. You're stuck.
So I think that a lot of times overthinking is the symptom of us not opening up these messages. And like, I mean, jokingly about the am I legally or not legally, I'm just talking about friends. Like if I'm talking about other stuff, that's different. But friends, like I don't feel like there's somewhere in the code of law that says you have to open your buddy's email and check it diligently. Like what? Right? But people have these expectations, and this is somewhat of a rabbit hole. We're not going to go down there, but maybe that's another episode. But we have expectations of how the world needs to function. And if it doesn't function the way we think it needs to, then we begin to compensate it with thinking to justify and or solve the problem. But what we don't know is the way we think is the result of our experiences that we've had, the education we received, the media we consumed, the parents that we had, the schools that we went to, friends we had, ancestral programming, and a whole bunch of other stuff, culturally, societally. So when you meet someone who's from a different culture and you can't interpret exactly what they're thinking or what they're whatever, it's going to cause even more overthinking in the coming years because of migration. Globally, anywhere there's migration or a large amount of migration, people are going to overthink. And if you think on the side of the immigrants, they are going to overthink as well. They're like, well, these people might not like me. I'm not going to be treated well, or they're not going to treat me like human. That's not true. First of all, I think there are a lot of good people here in America that regardless of someone's legal status, they will treat them with respect and love. That being said, is there a despise on the behavior of the government on some policies that has been made by people that are not perfect, that have certain agenda? Who knows? What I am saying here, though, is I think that what's happened is happening. It's okay. We can make it a win-win-win, but it's something we haven't considered yet as a society. The reason we complain, right, including myself, about migration is, what if it affects our economy and the safety of our citizens?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Which we've seen cracks of already.
We have seen it. Now, the question then is, how can we solve that problem so that it increases our GDP, our safety, our security, and our resources based on the certain situation that we're in right now?
I want to give a tool real quickly, if you're open.
Wait,
to
before you do that,
Okay.
I want to say one last thing.
I thought you were closing. That's why I want to give the tool before.
Oh, not yet.
Can we just look at her? She's giving herself a whole little bath right now.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
This
happening.
is
That's
hysterical.
cute.
For everyone on audio, there's a cat giving herself a bath right now.
Just on the table, all 3 cameras.
She's doing self-care, guys.
Yeah.
She's not overthinking at all.
No, she's chilling.
That's the beautiful thing about this cat.
But your
Now-
closing point.
Yes, my point is, if we are taught to worry about a problem that has been done in a way that we can't really do much about because there's a large quantity of events occurring, and there are still people regardless, whether we like it or not. The truth is, if we think about what kind of problems are going to occur, I don't think we shouldn't. I think we should, so that we can be prepared. But also, most of the population on either sides are not thinking, what is the ultimate way to make this a benefit for both sides and all sides?
That's a really good point.
How can we focus on the ultimate outcome and not worry and overthink while being prepared to protect your family? Because look, there's going to be a clash of values. And I mean, that's just how it is, right? And I remember my grandfather doing business in Southeast Asia at the end of World War II. And when the Japanese took off from the island, supposedly the locals were extremely unkind to anyone, and they would either seek them out and make them slave workers, or they would have to hide somewhere, right? It's basically, my grandfather was being chased down either, I mean, I don't know all of the details, but I think there were times that he was being forced to work for absolutely free, forced labor, and he came from a wealthy merchant family, but because of the geopolitical events that occurred, he was basically made someone who is a fugitive or a slave. And I don't know all of the details, and I don't think it's the point. The point is, he was a wealthy merchant that was stuck in a situation where there's a clash between, and he's not even migrating. He was just a visitor doing business. And the locals and him were having a clash, right? In metaphorically and physically. So in this situation, we're a very powerful nation here. And a lot of people coming through that we have no idea who they are, who they're not. We have to be prepared. I think that's smart. And meanwhile, election season isn't tomorrow. We still have a few months, and things are still going to keep happening. So what can we do to prepare? Meanwhile, plot out a long-term plan of making sure this group of people, good or not so good, or everything in between and beyond, is treated in a way that yields the ultimate outcome that benefits both parties.
Yeah, I think as both sides, we need to move away from that competition and move towards cooperation, right? Because if we're still like, this side's right, the extremist, you're just competing to see whose argument's right rather than cooperating and moving forward as a country. I want to give one tool for the listeners out there who may be overthinking, if they're calling it, because what William brought up with the message delivery mechanism, it's so important. If you're getting those messages and now you're like, you've never gone through upgrade, because what William also said is very true. We're coming in there with all these values, all these beliefs, and all this data and past information that's helping or propelling us to that moment.
Yeah, it's constructed everything up until that point.
And that might be the filter. It is the filter of how you're going to open up that message. So are you doing it in a fearful state? And that is not allowing you to actually open up the message, right? So if you haven't been through our training, I would highly encourage you to check it out so you can actually get better tools that I'm gonna give you right now, because this is very generalized and I'm gonna give you on this podcast, right? Change your perception of there's an opportunity on that message.
Yes, dude.
It just go into it. Be like, this is a learning mechanism for me right here, right now. Because every time I'm not above negative emotions, I still get them. But my perception about my negative emotion is awesome. This is here to teach me something right here, right now. And as soon as I learn from this anger, I learn from this guilt or the sadness, whatever it is, I'm going to move forward to a new identity. Something awesome is going to happen to me. So every time I actually feel a negative charge, it's awesome. What do I need to learn right now? And if you're getting to that message or you don't want to open up the app, it's probably because you think something bad's on the other side. So you're presupposing something bad's going to happen. So that's one framework tool to use. We have way more tools that are going to help you even faster, really.
But then if they are letting the notifications stack up, they're not checking it too, because you would have to change. in order to make them go away, the idea, what you said is like so freaking on the money, because people, it's an opportunity. Like, you're not being masochistic by being like, oh, I'm going to open this up and it's going to be this discomfort or whatever. It's not like you enjoy that. It's because on the other side of that is an opportunity to change. And that will, I am who I am today because I've changed like 10 million times. And that's how we move forward. And so when the anxiety comes, it's because people are like, well, on the other side of this notification or these emotions I'm ignoring, I would have to change who I am right now. It's like weird. You hear people, they're like, if you can't accept me at my worst, you don't get me at my best. I'm like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You know, it's like, wouldn't you want autonomy on yourself? Wouldn't you aspire to just like, I'm going to try and be like an even better version of myself? And that can come with a little bit of discomfort. Congratulations, you're not perfect. This is not news to anybody, so open the message.
But what a beautiful mechanism that the human body and mind is to actually remind us, be willing to remind us, right? Like, hey, still got something for you here to learn.
I got something for you.
Yeah, like I'm trying to, like, you told me you want this. I'm just, here's what you need to learn to go to the next step, bro. I'm right here. I got you.
It's so worth it too. Go through it. It's a little uncomfortable. It will be so worth it. Huh.
Cool.
Bars.
Get ready for the next episode because, yeah, we got something cool to share.
All right, everyone. Like, subscribe, share. Thank you for joining.
We'll see you next time.
Life is good and it gets better every day.